Hey there guys, and welcome to my Tales of Symphonia Dawn of the New World retrospective. In the event you haven't been through one of these before and you don't really know what I'm doing, whenever I beat a game, I always like to spend a second to, after I've beaten it, come back, think about it critically, and talk about the game as a whole, rather than just my impressions immediately after beating it. Very, very often I can talk about the ending of the game after I beat it, but it's hard for me to get a, whole game retrospective and, look at everything. So,
I'm afraid that you're too late, Emil.
The first thing I want to talk about is the fact that a lot of people told me before I started playing this that this was one of the bad Tales games. And frankly, I disagree with them wholeheartedly. However, I can understand that this is one of the disappointing Tales games. This is very much not the Tales game that you would have expected when hearing they were making a Tales of Symphonia sequel. And I do have to say that, especially on the internet, people have a very hard time distinguishing bad versus disappointing. If something's not what they expected, even if the thing that is delivered is pretty good, they will still say that it's bad because it wasn't what they wanted. And I really feel like that's what's happened here. I look at the game as a whole, and yeah, there are some places it falls down, there's places that could be better, but overall it delivers pretty solidly. It has an amazingly solid antagonist. Frankly, Emil is not bad. The plot works. It holds together pretty well. It has a lot of internal logic, and frankly, there are moments in the plot that they handle fucking perfectly. I'll never forget when I was in Altamira and there was that agonizing scene where Tenebrae stopped me from going after Marta, which made no effing sense because my whole job was to protect Marta. Except, of course, later you find out that no, Emil actually was Ratatosk, and it makes complete sense when Tenebrae's like, okay, Marta's going off to die, you need to stay here. There's no reason to risk yourself, Lord. Because obviously they can't say that yet because that reveal hasn't happened, but it was perfect. So, with that being said, let me talk about. I always start these off saying good things, but there are some issues. Well, before I get to the issues, let me just give a brief moment to just talk about how amazing of a villain Richter is. Richter, honestly, may be my favorite villain in the Tales series, at least of the 6 games I've played, simply because the hallmark of a good villain, at least for me, is that you completely buy into what he's doing. A great villain is someone you can look at, and while you don't necessarily agree with their methods, you can see yourself in them, and that's what makes them truly terrifying. If you look at a villain and you're like, oh my god, I can totally see myself doing that in those situations. Even though you may acknowledge what they're doing is abhorrent, there's still a degree of understandability to it. And Richter, I don't even find what he's doing as abhorrent. His basic idea is I really want to know what his relationship with Aster was. I feel like that Richter didn't really have any friends except for Aster. I don't necessarily want to say they were in a relationship, although I'm sure people have, because the internet, you can't be really close to someone without people assuming there's a relationship there, which always bothers me. But it feels like Richter's like the only person that I really cared about in this world got killed by Ratatosk. So I need to kill Ratatosk. Unfortunately, Ratatosk is a freaking god, basically. So I'm going to need power from the demons in order to actually kill him. However, again, in order to actually be able to kill him, I also need to stop the demons from actually taking over the world, because it doesn't do any damn good for me to save Aster in order to have the world immediately destroyed. So he had this, it was a convoluted plot, but it's one I can completely get behind. And he has one of the freaking most amazing battle themes I've ever heard. God, I was almost mad that I beat Richter as easily as I did because I wanted to hear that damn theme more. I've probably listened to it 6 times since I beat the game. I'm really, really a big fan of Richter, and frankly, Richter reminds me a lot of the final boss of Tales of Vesperia. I won't say specifically who that is, because I know most people haven't played it, but they're both enigmatic characters that you work with throughout the duration of the game. But the big thing that Richter does that was amazing is that you have a very, very amicable approach to him throughout the entire game, and so the whole game you're not really sure where he is. And so that makes the reveal at the end that makes him a pretty decent guy you completely accept that. You're completely okay with that reveal, because the whole game he's been enigmatically on your side. And so you didn't really want to fight with him at the end. And so it's just, I really feel like Richter is one of the highlights of this game. They really did a good job selling who he was. The only complaint I have about Richter is the fact that his side quest is completely missable. And it adds so much to both his and Dameol's character. There's no reason that should not be a part of the main quest. I complained about that at the time it came up. But overall, yeah, I really like Richter. You completely understand why he's doing it, and his reactions seem very genuine, frankly. The second good thing, before I get into the bad, because there are some bad things in this game. I'm not letting it off the hook. This is not going to be puppies and rainbows from review. But, Emil's character... If I had told you that Emil is one of my favorite protagonists back in the first episode, I'm pretty sure past me would have smacked me in the face. And it's... I feel very conflicted with Emil, because on the one hand, I feel like Emil's characterization was stagnant. There was a very slight bit of character growth that happened, and it seemed to happen, you know, he went through the whole game, and he was super apologetic, and he didn't have any self-confidence, and Ratato's mode was kind of the redemption to that, and there was a very slow shift into realizing Ratato's mode was out of control, and so our perception of Emil changed amazingly throughout the game. And I think they really did a really good job with that. I've talked about this before because it's one of my favorite twists in a movie. There's a movie with, oh god dang, I can never remember its stupid name. But ultimately, it has to do with a, one second. I'm not looking it up right now. It basically has to do with a guy whose family gets attacked, and he swears revenge, kind of like you'd expect a movie to do. But he just goes way too far. He, you know, ends up getting revenge on the guys that killed his family, and on the lawyer that got them off of the sittings, and on the judge that was in the sitting, and then he wants to destroy Parliament. You know, it just goes way too far, and it's just the way the movie slowly piles that on. So he goes from being the hero to the villain by the movie. I really enjoyed that progression, and Emil is kind of the same way. They really handled the revelation of his character very well. But that said, his actual character changes very little. He starts off very unsure of himself, and then he finds out who he really is, and gains a little bit of resolve. But even then, it's not really a resolve, and he's kind of like, he's still avoidant to the end of the game. He doesn't really seem to grow that much. I think it would have been awesome if Emil had realized who he really was and realized that he had the power to get revenge and actually gone down a darker path and had to be stopped in order to actually come back into the light. I think it would have been a much more satisfying plot that way. But that said, like I said, the reveal of Emil is fantastic. Overall, I feel like the way Emil was handled, I just really get behind it. He was annoying to watch, but his arc was beautiful. And so I'm really actually positive on Emil at this point. Unfortunately, that brings us to talking about Marta. And Marta just fell flat for me. I know I complained about this at the end of the last episode, and just how inconsequential Marta seemed. She started out, and she just sort of randomly declared that she was in love with Emil before she even had a freaking clue who Emil even was. And then she realized Emil wasn't who she thought he was going to be, but she still loved him anyway. And then she just, she's a lost puppy practically, and she goes through the whole game, and basically the closest thing she gets to character development is realizing that she's been kind of a whiner and has been relying on others to solve her problems. But I still don't ever actually see her solving any of her problems. So I don't know. At the end of the day, with Marta, I'm just like, she seems a completely wasted character. You know, this is a game that only introduces really 3 characters, and 2 of them, okay, Tenebrae is just 7 pounds of awesome. Richter is handled really well. Emil is a little bit grating when you first meet him, but by the end of the game, you're completely behind him. And then Marta just falls flat on her face. Even Aqua seems to be a better character than Marta. Because Aqua, at least, there is some interesting dichotomy there, where Aqua is pledged to Ratatosk, but ends up breaking from that, and being influenced by the force of Richter's personality, and it's really interesting. I actually really wish at the end of the game they'd had something with Aqua and, her pledge, because she does end up being awakened and serving Ratatosk, but, some of the conflict there. At the end, whenever Ratatosk attaches himself to Richter while Emil goes out to the good ending, there should have been something with Aqua. I know she was a super minor character, but I was way more interested in her story, and the sort of duality of nature of being tied to someone that you don't really want to... They could have done really, really interesting things with Aqua. Marta. They just sort of it felt like the game designers were like, well, we have to have a love story. We have to have them end up together. Why? I didn't buy it at all. It seemed completely out of place for me. So, Marta is my biggest source of frustration in this game, because it just seems completely unnecessary. I almost feel like you could have the game without Marta, and it would work just as well, except for the fact that you need Marta to be the dummy in order to keep Vanguard from going after actual Ratatosk. So I guess you couldn't completely get rid of her. Even her, brute revelation didn't really seem all that genuine to me. Speaking of characters that had absolutely no purpose being in the game, what the hell was going on with Hawk? Seriously, Alice and Dex actually had a story. It was missable, and I did miss a lot of it, and people had to link me the last scene. But still, at least it went somewhere, and at least... I still don't know how much feelings Alice actually had for Dex. I'm not sure if he was just convenient for her or what the deal was. But you absolutely ran into a situation where... Alice and Dex seemed like fully fleshed out characters, and they had a story, they seemed interesting. Hawk had absolutely no purpose to him. I don't know what he was there for. He was a puffed up jabroni the entire time, and then whenever he got killed by a brute, I didn't even care. I was like, he did nothing in this game. At all. I really feel like that was a wasted opportunity. If you're going to give a character a name and that much screen time, you should do something with them. Even Brute, who at that point I also didn't give a shit about, at least had something that happened with him, and at least had a purpose. The other thing that seemed, alongside Hawk, it was the monster mechanic. The monster mechanic didn't really... I've been thinking about it, and you could have taken the monster mechanic out of the game entirely. The game would have played almost the exact same. There were only a couple of battles where you actually had to use the monsters, and you could have easily rewritten that in order to, prevent those from happening. At the end of the game with Alice and Dex, simple, just have Lloyd not get teleported away and go ahead and extend Martel's protection to the Chosens. So you have you can have a party with Emil, Marta, Lloyd, Zealous, and Colette. Boom! There, you just solved the fact that you don't have a monster with you. So they acted like collecting these monsters was a major part of the game, and it ended up being completely negligible. Everybody talks about as you unlock more monsters, you'll unlock better powers, but that never happens as far as I can tell. Maybe I just never got enough, but it never seemed to actually pay off. The closest thing you had was that Ein Sulfur got stronger the more monsters you collected. And why the hell could you bind monsters to you for Centurions you didn't have yet? Why were the Water Centurions obeying me instead of Aqua? It seems like a mechanic they wanted to play with and a mechanic they wanted to put in the game, but it didn't actually end up mattering. It was completely nonsensical. If you wanted to do that, you should have made that the focus and just had the Symphonia characters be side characters that you talk to and that would give you information but wouldn't actually join your party. And speaking of which, let's talk about the Symphonia characters for a second. I feel like this is going, back to the beginning of the video, this is the biggest reason for the disappointment. I feel like the Dawn of the New World tried to play both sides. There's really two ways you can make a sequel. You can make a direct sequel where you take the characters from the first game and you just continue their story. For a great example of this, look at the Mass Effect series, where it's Commander Shepard every time, and it's a continuation, and some of the same characters come back, some of them don't, but it's an ongoing narrative. Or like the Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky, first chapter and second chapter. Obviously, that was meant to be one game, but yeah, it's a direct sequel, and it works fine. Because you've got the same protagonist, and it's just it's a continuation of the story. Or you can have the way most sequels work, where it's a continuation of the world, but not of the main cast. Where you look at this in the Suikoden series, you run into this in the Breath of Fire series. Even the Personas are like that, where the world is the same, but the actual, the actual cast, if the original, cast shows up at all, it's only as a brief cameo. Maybe they'll join you, maybe like one member or two members will join you, but for the most part, the emphasis is very much on a different group, a different story, a different area. And that also works really, really well, because you make it very clear, okay, we're breaking away, this is a different narrative. Don't get tied down to the first game, this is a different game now. And again, like I said, that works very, very, very well. The problem is, Dawn tried to do both, where it wanted to tell the story of Emil and Marta, but yet it realized it didn't have enough characters to really make that story work. And so they just sort of propped up Emil's story on all of the Tales cast, or all of the Symphonia cast. I guess just to clarify, because someone's watching this and like, wait, which Tales game? Oh my gosh! On all the Symphonia cast. And it just didn't work for me. And I think that's why a lot of people wanted a story, wanted a continuation of Lloyd's quest. They wanted a sequel to Tales of Symphonia. And they kept teasing you with it. They kept, bringing in the Symphonia characters and bringing the Symphonia cast and making you think, oh, hey, this is going to be what this game is about. And it's completely not what this game is about. This game is about Emil, and these guys are glorified cameos for the most part. So that was really frustrating for me. I really didn't like or appreciate that necessarily. Because I just felt like it could have been done so much better, I felt like there was a very real opportunity to handle the situation in a better... and actually, I don't even know if that's true, because I feel like the reason they did it this way is because their budget was cut to hell, and doing this let them reuse a ton of assets from the first game. They couldn't bring back very many of the original voice actors on the budget they had. A lot of them weren't willing to come back. They weren't able to really justify, the world map had to be cut down. They had to make so many cuts, and so being able to use an established world really, really helped. But I don't know if I wish the Symphonia cast had been less involved, but it's like you either need to go all the way or none of the way. If you want to tell Emil's story, then quit highlighting the Symphonia cast so much. And it was almost insult. I got really frustrated because every single character just sounded wrong to me, and they eventually grew on me, but I think that's what contributed to the disappointment I talked about at the top of the episode. If you're going to do a sequel, you have to either do a direct sequel, or you have to make sure there's some very clear distance between the two games, or people will expect a direct sequel. And they'll be disappointed when they don't get it, so even if your game is okay, they're going to treat it like it's not. And you know what? Fair enough. The game isn't giving them what they want, so of course they're going to have a negative reaction to it. In the end, when I look at this game, and last thing I want to mention, because this bugged me to death, it's a Tales tradition at the end of the battle to have a skit that comes up. But the problem is there were no skits that had anything to do with the monsters. So in a very real way, the game penalized you for not using the Symphonia cast when they were there. Which again just went against the whole point of your game seems to be, or the whole shtick of your game seems to be that you want to have people using these monsters. But yet your game actively discourages them from doing that. It seems like there was a lot of design space that was missed, unfortunately. And that's just really disappointing, That's not a good thing, yo. So, at the end, final summation, what do I think about the game? Obviously, as you can tell from the way I started this episode, I'm pretty positive on the game. If you tell me that this is a bad Tales game, well, here's the thing. If you tell me this is a bad game, I will fight you. And I will defend it. Now, if you tell me it's a bad Tales game, and compared to the other Tales games, it's easily one of the worst, I would agree with that. It's difficult for me to compare it to the other Tales games, though, because it's not a flagship game. It's not meant to be compared to Tales of Symphonia directly. It's not meant to be compared to Vesperia and Graces and Abyss directly. Those are flagship titles, and they're meant to have a little bit more of a oomph to them. This is a continuation, and you do have to somewhat judge those slightly differently. So, It's the only of the side series I've played, but I did very much enjoy playing it, and I thought the developers did about the best job they could given the resources they were given. That doesn't mean I'm letting Namco off the hook. I really, if you're going to make a sequel to a behemoth like Symphonia, you need to do it right. You need to take the time and actually do the sequel. And it really feels like someone decided to, you know what, Nintendo doesn't sell that well, let's just go ahead and like slack off and not spend our time making this really good. It'll make money, it's got Symphonia in the title, and it's a disservice to your fans to do that. Alright, if you want to make a side title that's not really meant to be legitimate, then do that. But you made this as a canonical follow-up, and then you slacked off in doing it. So there's a lot of room that this could get better. There's a lot of things they did wrong, but there's still a lot to love about this game. There's a lot of really beneficial things to. There's a lot of heart in it, and you can tell the developers. Most of the problem was in some design choices and in the production values that they were given. The developers did everything they were able to do within the confines that they found themselves in. And I respect that. I have to respect that. So, at the end of the day, like I said, I'm pretty damn positive on Tales of Symphonia. I think the developers did a pretty good job. My hats are off to them. I enjoyed playing it. And lastly, next, we're going to be getting into Tales of Xillia. The way this is going to work, just to make sure everyone is aware, is, as everyone knows, whenever I finish a title, especially the title that is being uploaded more than any others, a different title will start being uploaded 2 times a week. So Tales of Xillia will be on its 4 uploads, uploading every 4 days, at least until another game is beaten. And I am probably going the male path in Xillia. A number of people have told me that, yeah, if you're only going to play through it once, the male path makes a lot more sense, especially if you're going to then eventually play Xillia 2, because the stuff you miss by playing the female path is kind of important for the sequel. But that is open for it. Obviously, I don't know. I haven't played it yet. That's just what I've been told. So if that's incorrect, or if you have a different opinion, please talk about it below which path I should take.
I'm glad that you were me.
Other than that, look forward to that here in a couple of days. I did go ahead and get a copy of it. It's sitting on my desk right now. It's kind of amazing. I'm excited to play it. And yeah, we will push on. As for which game is going to be uploaded 2 times a week, I feel like it's probably Star Ocean. But I don't know that for a fact. Ultimately, what's going to happen is that I'm going to look at Ghost Trick and Star Ocean and see which one is getting more views. And it's pretty close between them, but I feel like Star Ocean just hedges it out. Just as an example, it's like right now, Episode 7 of Star Ocean has 59 views. It was uploaded like earlier today, whereas Ghost Trick, that is 3 days old, has 57 views. Prior to that, the previous Star Ocean had 99 views. Previous Ghost Trick had 77 views. So it does seem like Star Ocean has ever so slightly more interest. So it will probably be the game that takes over as an every other day upload. And then Ghost Trick will probably just finish out its run, because it feels very much like I'm getting close to the end of Ghost Trick. After that, it will move on to Danganronpa Ultra Despair Girls. So, things that are exciting are in the future. See you next time, guys. Thank you very much for tuning in.
And